So Virginia said, well, wait till you meet Frank. You'll love him, Johnny. And I said, well, when am I going to be able to meet him? And she says, tomorrow, about 11 o'clock, he's going to come up and we're going to visit. And I said, well, you know, and then they told me about Frank coming over every morning and sitting down in the barbershop, getting usually a shave or maybe just a trim or something. He spent every morning in the barbershop at the Astoria. That was his home. That's his second home in the morning. And so I got up the next morning, and both girls are still asleep there, sound asleep. And so I went downstairs, and I saw the barbershop sitting there. And so, you know, I wanted to see what Frank looked like. And I walked in the barbershop, and it was like 5 barbers in there. And they said, sit down. He said, it'll be a couple of minutes before they get to you. I said, that's fine. And I looked over, and I picked Frank real quick because he was sitting there and he was in charge. You could see that Frank was in charge wherever he was. He was it. And you could see it in him. And Frank looked up, he was reading the paper, and he looked up and looked right straight at me. Not knowing that, you know, but he might have thought that I was a man was going to hit him there. A lot of reasons that he looked at me. And a couple guys with him. And I knew not to stare or anything. I kind of took my eyes and put them in different places. And then Frank, all of a sudden, he got up, and the 2 other men with him, they got up and they left. And so they went up to the room where Marion and Virginia was to meet me, and I was down in the barbershop. So I realized that, and so I said, I better wait until he gets up there. I said, I know that's where he's going. And so I called on the telephone at the desk. I called in the room, and Marion woke up. I said, Marion, as I left the barbershop, I went, as I said, and called up to the room to see if Frank had come in. And she said, Frank has called and said he's coming up. Well, I wanted to be sure that, you know, Frank got into the room before I went up there, because he saw me in the barbershop, and he might have had his mindset that I was somebody trying to hit him or something. And if I went up there, it might have been a gunplay right there in front of the whole world. And so I walked on up to the mezzanine. So I was only 2 flights down from him. And I stood there just for a minute, was thinking about the whole situation, me meeting him, what am I going to say to him. But, you know, I never thought in lifetime that day would bring me many, many good days and many, many sad days in my life. And I never thought that it would bring me back to Manhattan later with a wonderful lady that I married. Now, she wasn't in the picture because we wasn't married yet. And if I would have realized at that time what all of this is going to turn out to be, I don't really think I would have changed it, because I wouldn't have met my love of my life. And so I'm glad that it happened like it did. So I walked up another flight of steps, and, you know, I was looking, I heard so much about Frank and the guys that hung with him, and I wanted to be ready if I had to, you know, take one of them out, I would, no doubt. And so I saw it was clear. I went up to the 3rd floor, and I went to the room, and I just tapped lightly. And Marion come to the door, and Frank was already inside. They was having a drink, and a couple of his boys were sitting in chairs kind of close to the bed. And it was a big room. It was kind of like a VIP room that Frank did to people like her and anybody that come in, and had everything in it. And so she said, "Come over here, I want you to meet Frank." And I looked at Frank, and I was trying to figure him out, what he was, and I looked at him down in the barbershop, and then he realized who I was, and a smile come on his face, like, you know, well, I hit you wrong down there, you know. And so he said, "Johnny," he said, "what have you been doing lately?" I said, whatever I can. And Marion spoke up and says, "Hey, you better listen to Johnny, because Johnny is one tough, you know, SB." And she says, "Nobody in the world can mess with him." And Frank says, "Nobody?" And she says, "Yeah, I mean nobody. He's tough. I've been through it with him." And Frank said, "Well, he's the kind of guy I need around me." And he told me then, he said, "You know what?" He said, "You know, you come on with me," and he said, "We'll talk things over, and I'm going to show you a few places around where, you know, they know us, and you'll be safe there, and some people that we know, introduce you to them." And so I spent that day and up in the night running around with Frank. We went all the way up to 73rd at a bar up there, which later it was a bad situation for myself in that bar. Quite a bit later, a couple of years later, and it was Joe Gallo and me. I had a little tumble up there with somebody. Well, anyway, come back down, and I was so happy. Marion, she would make me happy as a woman, you know, could make a man. And she's the kind of person that, you know, you could tell anything that happened that day, whatever, and she could accept it, you know, you wouldn't be embarrassed by her or anything. And then, about my third day there, I met a little man. He wasn't much of a man, and his thoughts wasn't much of a man either, and his brother. And his name was Joe Gallo. He thought he was the toughest man that ever lived.